Hello guys and welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be looking at a scenario where all the regions of Europe went to war. So these are not perfect by any means, but I wanted to make sure that it was at least decently even. The Baltics are incredibly weak, they're probably just going to die. But a lot of them are at least decently evened out. I'd say Central Europe might be the strongest. They have Germany and Poland, which means that they have two incredibly powerful countries on their side. Whereas, like, the purple team of France, that's Western Europe. The Iberian, Union has Spain. Southern Europe has Italy. So, yeah. There's also, of course, the Russian faction, which I just added Kazakhstan to. There's the Caucasus-Turkish alliance. The Balkans, Eastern Europe. The Baltics, Central Europe. The British Isles, the Nordics. And I already mentioned Iberia, and Southern Europe. So yeah, not perfect. The Balkans actually stretch into Romania, Greece, and Albania, etc., etc. I also gave Southern Europe Cyprus, as it's obviously very much in the south, but I could have gave it to the Turkic alliance. Although honestly, I think that's enough explaining. Here you can probably make out what all of the regions are. Let's go and begin. As well, a few starting pushes are going to be made. Of course, as I mentioned, our number one is either going to be Russia, Central Europe, probably followed by Western Europe, then maybe, I don't know. I don't even know what comes after that, but I guess we'll see as they slowly begin to expand. And Central Europe is going to do just that as they begin to push into the Benelux region. Also, yes, you're probably going to disagree with me on who I make win this, but hey, I mean, if you disagree, sure, there's nothing I can do about it. Sorry, I guess, but I don't know. There are many ways this could play out. France is going to attempt to push into Switzerland, but they blow up some bridges and now they're fine. Meanwhile, Italy is going to begin to push into southern France, capturing Nice and a bit of land around it. They also make landing in Corsica, capturing the whole island. From there, Spain begins to push up into France, together with Portugal, past the mountains. Yes, I know, there are mountains there. So yeah, France, you'd think Central Europe has it the worst, having to fight in all borders, but France has borders with Spain, Italy, and Germany, and the UK is probably going to try and do something there as well. That's going to be annoying. Meanwhile, the British Isles do make a landing, this time in Iceland. They don't have to capture much land before Iceland surrenders, though, as Iceland does not have a lot of very populated land. They're just not very populated to begin with. From there, the British Isles do begin to plan a landing in France, but also one over here in the Nordics. Meanwhile, over here in Eastern Europe, well, the Russian alliance is actually going to be making multiple attempts to push in, one into the Baltics, from Kaliningrad, and from up here in northern Russia. Meanwhile, the Eastern Europeans are also going to begin to push into the Baltics to attempt to basically just not let Russia connect themselves. And yeah, the Baltics here are probably going to be the weakest, so they're going to fall. From there, the Eastern Europeans do not manage to stop Russia from connecting themselves, but these two are going to be each other's main enemies for a lot of the video. Eastern Europeans and the Russians. The Eastern Europeans do end up cutting Russia off, but this is not before Russia starts an invasion of probably their strongest country, Ukraine. One up here in the north, and one over here in the east. They also begin to push down to Georgia, taking South Ossetia and Abkhazia, I think. Well, they do that and begin to push down to Azerbaijan until Turkish troops arrive. Meanwhile, Turkey is beginning to push down to Bulgaria and down to Greece. They capture all of Cyprus as Italy decided not to defend the island, and honestly, yeah, they're pretty far away, why would they? Meanwhile, the Balkans and the Southern Europeans are fighting it out, with the Balkans pretty much taking out all of Albania, and the Southern Europeans pushing up into North Macedonia and a bit of Bulgaria. They capture a lot of North Macedonia, but not before the Balkans begin to push down to northern Greece, and Greece, fearing a massive encirclement in the north, is forced to retreat troops out of all Balkan lands to further protect their own lands. Starting here, the Balkans are also going to begin to push into Romania, aka Eastern Europe, but they're also going to begin to push into Bulgaria, while Hungary pushes into Slovenia and Croatia. We also see the Eastern Europeans begin to push into Austria, although their troops are being very, just spread out. And the debate over who's stronger, Germany or Poland, is over now, as they are working together to push down to Slovakia and to push down into Belarus and Russia. Well, Kaliningrad, occupied by Russia. So yeah, that debate's over, but a new one is starting. Who's stronger, Eastern Europe or Southern Europe? Central Europe or Southern Europe? And Central Europe is winning so far, but not before the Balkans begin to push into Italy as well. From there, Italy realizes that the Southern European alliance is not going to help them at all, as Greece is falling themselves, and honestly, they just decide to fully abandon Greece. They see absolutely 0 point in holding it down, as in the end, Greece is going to fall here. So yeah. Now the Turkic alliance has expanded greatly, and so have the Balkans, as they now have one less front to worry about. Well, actually, no, they just made a new one with Turkey, which they actually kind of worked it out, as the Balkans capture the rest of the mainland of Greece and the southern island, while Turkey continues to push into Bulgaria and the panhandle of Greece. Meanwhile, basically, the Eastern Europeans and the Turkish make a kind of deal to split Bulgaria into two. They both begin their pushes into the north and cut the country into two. From there, it is split between the two allies, and sadly for them, since I'm not allowing alliances in this video, that's already over and they're now at war. So yeah, Turkey's actually doing pretty well for themselves, pushing into the Balkans, but with all the other fights going on in the region, well, their troops are distracted. From there, France is going to try and consolidate their troops. The Netherlands here are going to fall to the German might. Meanwhile, the UK's planned invasion is about to take effect, but not before their invasion of the Nordics. When are they going to do this? Well, when Central Europe has finished capitulating Denmark, as they capture Copenhagen and the entire country capitulates. They then hold a maritime border with Sweden and Norway, not wanting to push any further. Seeing a lot of Swedish and Norwegian troops down here in the south, the UK manages to make the landing they've been planning for in Norway. They then begin to push around the coast until a lot of Nordic troops arrive. But where are the rest of them? Well, they're over here on the Finnish border pushing back the Russians. They know that they're going to have enemies to the south and just pretty much on all directions from landings being made, so they want to gain as much land as they can from Russia before Russia begins to push back. This goes quite successfully, but at this point the Nordics are pinned down, and they're actually going to manage to push the UK out. If you're wondering how they did this, well, they did a little thing called a naval invasion, captured some islands, then made a deal with the Eastern Europeans to push Russia out of the Baltics. This is going greatly, as the region is split, along with Kaliningrad being split between the Eastern Europeans and the Central Europeans. So yeah, a lot of land just fell for Russia, but there was a triple alliance against them, and that was just too much for them to bear. From there, though, once again, these two former allies are going to go back to war, as there can be no peace here. Sadly for the Central Europeans, they had to pull some troops out of southern Poland to put in the north and capture Kaliningrad, so the Eastern Europeans are going to push back a bit, but not too much. From there, the Eastern Europeans want to consolidate their front line, so they begin to push into northern Serbia and out into Croatia. They make a deal with the Italians, I'll just call them Italy at this point, it's just Italy basically, to push back the Balkans out of their country and begin to push down the Croatian coast, meeting up with the Eastern Europeans and splitting all of these countries, aka Croatia and Slovenia, along with a bit of Bosnia. So yeah, Eastern Europe's actually doing pretty well for themselves here. In real life, I'd actually consider Poland to be Eastern European, so I probably should have given that, but even without it, they are doing very well, and they begin to push into Austria, which is from Central Europe. So yeah, Eastern Europe here doing fantastically, just doing amazingly for themselves, while everyone else is just trying to keep up with their insane amount of expansion. If you're wondering where's the Russian army, what are they doing? Well, they're pushing back the Eastern Europeans. As I said, these are two large rivals, and they're going to attempt to capture Minsk, which is almost going to work, but luckily for the Eastern Europeans, they get some troops there just in time. The Russians then begin to push down towards Kiev, but once again, the Ukrainian army stops them until Russia begins a full-out invasion across the entire front and captures Crimea. So yeah, the Russians are pushing in here, but the Eastern Europeans are doing very well in other areas, so they're not too worried. From there, the Russians continue to push down to the Caucasus Mountain region, capturing a good amount of Azerbaijan and Georgia. Also, Georgia actually has like an exclave here, but it's fine, it doesn't matter in this map, since Azerbaijan and Armenia are on the same team, which really shouldn't happen, you know, but it is. Also, technically, it isn't just Russia, Kazakhstan's in it, but they aren't doing much. From there, Russia begins to push back the Nordics, as they were forced to retreat some troops out of northern Russia to push back the UK. We also see Russia begin to push back into Estonia, as the Nordics really can't defend this any longer, and it is split between the Eastern Europeans and the Russians. So yeah, this map is already looking very different. Who's doing the best? Maybe it actually is the Russians, but they've lost Kaliningrad. The Nordics lost Denmark. Maybe it's the Iberians. They haven't lost any land, and I've kind of been ignoring them this whole time, but they've just been pushing steadily into southern France. So yeah, little by little, but they're making progress. As for the Italians, well, they're doing the same, pushing into southern France, prioritizing the region. And they technically also begin their own small push into Switzerland and try push back the Germans out of Austria, but both of those basically attempts don't do so great. Meanwhile, the Central Europeans are sprinting into northern France. This is blitzkrieg all over again, except this time it's going even better. And northern France here, well, they know they're gonna fall, but the UK says, you know what, we may have failed to take the Nordics, but France is falling and we're gonna take advantage of that. So they make a landing in the north and just begin to absolutely sprint down. France had even less troops on this border, and eventually these four factions are going to be splitting it up. The UK is going to get a good amount of land considering how late they joined, but they did contribute a good amount, so I'd say they deserve it. From there, the Central Europeans are also going to get a good amount of land back, along with all of Switzerland. And then the Southern Europeans and the Iberian Union are going to split the rest. So yeah, honestly, I'd say the Iberian Union is doing the best, solely because they haven't lost any land at all from Spain or Portugal, and they've only been gaining it. So yeah, quite a few regions here. Central Europe is also doing great, and Italy has actually managed to grow out a bit more. Since they lost Greece, Albania, and Cyprus, they've been alone, but you know what? They've been surviving. Where they're not surviving, though, is down here in the Balkans, as, they're getting kicked back. They were forced to dedicate a lot of divisions to France to take out the region, and they are now being fully kicked out by the Eastern Europeans and the Balkans. These two allies basically just kick out the Italians, and we can see that Italy's progress here is about to stop, as, well, now everyone's going after them. Originally it was France, now it's Italy. So yeah, Spanish troops are beginning to advance as well, and so are the Germans. I'm just stating the largest faction member, although over here in the east it's actually Poland, who is pushing into Lithuania and pushing back the Eastern Europeans, who are now struggling with Russia, and this time it's the Western Europeans and the Russians that split up the Baltics. So yeah, the Baltics here, you're really just being bullied around, aren't you? No, nothing you can really do about it. You're just going from empire to empire to empire. From there, Minsk is finally captured, and Belarus. Oh, bye-bye Belarus. Unluckily for Russia, though, since the Western Europeans started a small advance at the end, they actually managed to take a good amount of the land out of Belarus. From there, Eastern Europe is finally starting to see that they may not be able to win this, and they decide that their best chance is just to consolidate the South. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom decides that, okay, maybe we didn't win this the first time, but second time's the charm. We've already taken out France, so we've proved ourselves strong and gained a lot of strength in the process. And they make another landing in Norway. This time it's a bit more expected, but the UK has a lot more divisions there. And while the UK is pushing in, so are the Central Europeans into southern Sweden. And so are the Russians, taking back pretty much all of their lost land and beginning to push into southern Finland. Helsinki is on the brink of being captured, and Finland has been cut off from their allies. So yeah, the Nordics here are about to fall, and let's go ahead and see what that's going to look like. First things first, and that is the Russians. We're going to take pretty much all of Finland, and a good amount of northern Sweden and Norway. From there, the British are going to take pretty much the rest of Norway, actually all the rest of Norway, and a small amount of northern Sweden. And the Germans / Central Europeans are going to be taking everything that's left, aka just southern Sweden. So yeah, with that we're over and done with. That is one faction gone. Who's going to be the next to fall? Well, I have my contender, and just looking at this map, you can probably tell who that's going to be. But let's go ahead and show how it's going to happen. First things first, the Central Europeans. Honestly, I might be overestimating them here, but they're pushing down to Italy. Meanwhile, well, the Balkans are doing their own things and pushing back the Turks, as they now have to face the Russians over here in Georgia. The Russians are actually getting to the Turkish border. I know it's Turkey, but I have no idea how to pronounce it, so I'm just going to be saying Turkey for the sake of simplicity. But yes, I do know it, and I do recognize it. So yeah, the Russians are now beginning to push into northern Turkey, and Turkey is forced to push back, and an ongoing struggle starts until the Turks eventually make a front line about on their border. Sadly for them, this means retreating troops out of the Balkans, and both the Balkans and the Eastern Europeans are going to take advantage of this, even splitting the city of Istanbul. The Balkans saw this as very important and have successfully done it. The Turks no longer control the city, and it is now back to being Constantinople. I know that technically the Greeks would be the ones to reclaim it, but the Greeks actually aren't in this faction. But you know what? Let's rename it. Let's keep the Greeks happy, okay? I've already made all the Turks mad, so let's at least keep one side happy. Well, from here I'm going to delete even more people, so even more people are going to be mad, but you know what? That's just how it's going to go, as the Spanish are pushing into Italy, capturing Corsica and Sardinia and any land that they had left in France, along with a tiny bit of their western land. From there, the rest of it is going to be split, as a massive Balkan landing is happening in southern Italy, capturing a good amount of land. Arguable, but the Italian Navy is having to fight the Balkans, the Turks, the Germans, and the Spanish. So, yeah, they're about to be split. Spain's actually going to make a landing and get themselves a bit more land, but it is not enough to the point where I'm going to recognize it as a huge land grab. From there, the rest of southern and even a good amount of eastern Italy is given over to the Balkans, while the rest and pretty much most of northern Italy is given to the Germans. From here, well, the Balkans and the Central Europeans basically just kick out Spain from the peninsula, and a new stalemate is set up, as the Spanish are doing quite well for themselves, but they really are only two countries, and Andorra. Hey, don't forget about Andorra. But they can't really do much. I mean, in the end, as I said, only Spain and a bit of Portuguese help. They'll fall eventually. Who are they going to fall to? Well, you'd think it would be the Germans because they're on a rampage, but it's actually the UK. The UK is beginning to push into the rest of France and even making some landings along the northern Spanish coast. Capture a few major cities until cutting them off from the French parts, which is where everyone else basically just says, give me some of that, as the Balkans grab up Sardinia and Corsica and even push back the Central Europeans. I think I'm overestimating them, but we're also assuming that any issues, like obviously in real life you could never have the Ukrainians and Belarusians working together, you could never get the, I don't know, what were the other major controversies here? I guess the UK and Ireland, I don't know, just Serbia and everyone else in the Balkans would never get along or fight together, but for here we're going to be assuming they do. If you're wondering where Central Europe was all this time, well, they were over here taking the rest of France and Italy. From there, the UK is expediting their push into northern Spain. They breeze past the mountains and capture Barcelona, whilst also capturing Bilbao and a few other important cities. They then begin to push down the coast to capture Valencia, while making landings on the Balearic Islands? Don't know how to pronounce that, but yeah. Spain here, they're falling. They're falling to the UK. Don't know, I'm probably overestimating the UK as well, but some people just gonna get overestimated, some under. From there, the next country to fall is gonna be Turkey. They are pretty much on their own here, and they're facing the Russians flooding into the east. They're pretty much forced to give up a lot of this land, as they failed to make a stalemate along the mountains or the rivers that would normally help them. From there, the Balkans decide that this is their final chance to gain land before they start to fall, and they make a landing in Turkey. The country is split up between the two powers, and this is the Balkans' final chance to grab up a bunch of land before they finally start to fall. Once again, might have been overestimating them here, but that's just what I did. From there, the Russians make a new stalemate with the Balkans, and it's now all set up. So yeah, the world is not looking great for anyone, but how's it gonna get even worse? Well, the Russians and the Central Europeans are pretty much at a stalemate. Neither side is winning, but Eastern Europe is starting to just starting to fall. They are unable to continue with their advances in the Balkans, which allows the Balkans to begin to push back. And I really feel like I'm overestimating the Balkans here, which I probably am. But honestly, I've done enough talking in this video. Let's just go ahead and see how these powers are going to split up Eastern Europe. So of course, the Balkans are going to get a good amount of land, but a lot of it is also going to be given to Russia, and some of it is going to be given to Central Europe, along with a lot of Slovakia, most of Austria back, which is actually just going to fight the Balkans for the rest of it. They're also going to fight for the rest of Slovakia and begin to push up into Ukraine. From there, the rest of this land is going to be going to the Russians. So yeah, we really are down to just a few major powers here, but just to show that on a lot larger of a scale, while the UK just finished off Portugal and Spain. UK troops are a bit spread out, but for now they're doing fine. So yeah, 4 major powers here. Let's get it down to just 3, and that's where we'll end it off. And I'm sorry, UK, but you're going to be the next to fall, as the Russians are pushing back into Norway and Sweden. And they basically decide that they want all of the Nordics, so they also begin to push back the Central Europeans, but they manage to hold a lot of the more important parts of Sweden along the coast and in the south, where it's a little less cold, but still pretty cold. Oh my god, okay. Well, this video is getting a bit long, so let's go ahead and finish up as Russia retakes Iceland and a lot of other islands from the UK. Meanwhile, basically just the Central Europeans capture the rest of the Iberian Peninsula. As for the Balkans, well, while the Central Europeans are getting that massive land grab, they're going to retake a lot of Italy, even connecting up their 2 fronts, meaning they no longer have to rely on their navy. Although the Central European navy is considerably more powerful than the Balkans, so they retake Corsica and Sardinia, along with pushing down the coast. From here, well, we're going to go ahead and end it here. All sides are tired of fighting, and honestly, I don't know who would win here. The Russians have a pretty good front line. They could most likely kick the Germans and Polish out of the Nordics, and maybe find a place where they can hold a front over here in the Baltics. They could probably push out the Balkans from the Turkish peninsula and Cyprus, and then work together with the Central Europeans to capture it. The UK's navy is being able to hold them down for now, but eventually it would fall to the Central European navy. So yeah, this video could go on, but for now, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.